I know that. Daughter gonna be you like the dang queen.
Board governance training begin.
Hey, Alan Kennedy. Nice to meet you.
And by the way, guys, this is live stream.
This is live stream.
Live stream.
If you're watching that, you're bored at home.
Don't say anything, my husband watches them.
You watching the one?
He was in the background while he's at work, because he works from
Why
home.
are we live? Why are we live streaming our training? Mics are live.
We're live.
We're live.
It's an open meeting.
No, it's not, there's no voting.
All right.
Well, it's great to be in Savannah, Georgia today. I left about 4:45 this morning from right above Athens. So we do a little traveling sometimes, but it's great to be here. And I was really interested. I've had a chance not only to observe some of the other board meetings, been very impressed with some things I've seen. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name's Alan McKinnon, and I do several things, but I have a couple of things where I do some training with Georgia Leadership Associates. So we're doing a whole board training. You get 3 hours of credit. There's a couple of things, Mr. Chair, that has to happen. You know, there'll be a sign-in sheet that I think's already been taken care of, and then there'll be an evaluation at the end. So you'll get evaluation. Whatever you put down will be scanned and sent down to Dr. Laracy for him to review. So I want you to always know that you have a chance to get some input. Continuous improvement is what we believe in, even in board trainings. So real quick, just 2 seconds about myself. I'm a retired school superintendent for 9 years. High school principal, elementary principal. I survived because I taught middle school too. And so I worked at all the age levels. I did a little bit of everything. But here's the one thing I want you to know that I didn't really get a chance to tell you about. I've been on a lot of boards. When I was superintendent of a school district, Madison County, it's right on top of Clark, Athens. When I was superintendent in Madison County, I was also chair of Foothills. It's a charter school that works for the school systems there. So I was actually a board chair while I was superintendent. And so that was a real good because I would go from one role to another role. And then also, if I'm quite honest, as being on a board, I had to go to a lot of trainings, and some of them were really bad. I mean, they were bad. So I had a chance to sit in. So I hope today that when we get through, at least you might not like everything that we go over today, but hopefully at least it won't be bad. I hope not. That's my plan anyway. So listen.
Did you just say that you were a superintendent and a board chair for a charter school?
I was. Foothills Charter School, I was. I did say that.
What was that life like?
That was interesting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I didn't sleep a lot. Yeah, I didn't sleep a lot, but I was very supported. If you know anything about Mountain Ed, Foothills, Coastal Plains, I don't know if you know anything about those. They're really different charter schools. They're different. They're focused. They're just 9 through 12. They're at-risk students, so they're a little different. So you look it up, and you might see because they work in concert with school systems. So yeah. So matter of fact, I was helped to the committee to help start. Foothills was a replication of Mountain Ed, and that's what I helped do as a superintendent. Then, so yeah. I did say that. It's different, isn't it? It is different. So listen, do me a favor real quick. So let's do this. I know I got to keep talking to that microphone. I'm not used to talking in a microphone at a training. So, Mr. Chair, if you need to chastise me or Kurt, chastise me, okay? I'm open to all right, so listen, board members, I hadn't had a chance to get to know you real quick. I'd like to tell me your name. Tell me what's your vocation, profession, calling. You see it on there. Why did you run for the board? How many years have you been on the board? That always helps me. And what's a challenge you see, maybe other than budget?
I'm District 1, so I can start, right?
Yes.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. My name is Denise Grabowski. Vocation, I am an urban planner by profession, and I've been doing that for 20 plus years now. And why I ran for the board, lots of reasons. I served on school council for many years at Charles Ellis. And, I realized it was time to move on and out of that position, and was looking for the next opportunity to stay engaged in, service and education. And about that time, my predecessor announced that she was not planning to run again. And it was an ideal, coalescing, lining of the stars, whatever you want to call it. So I have been serving. I'm on my 4th year now, end of my 1st term. So hopefully will remain in this seat after May 21st. And what challenges most as a board member? I think that the changes that we have seen in education and in maybe some of the ways in which, during the pandemic, our teachers were really elevated to everything that they were doing for our students and for our community. And then since that time, there's almost been a reversal in too many instances where they are not given the respect and the professionalism deserved of our staff that work so hard for the betterment of our students. And so I think that culturally, that is a challenge that extends beyond the board, but I think it's something that we need to continue to elevate, support our teachers and our staff, and really refocus on the priority of providing the highest quality education for every student in our district.
Very good.
Hi, my name is Deanna Hoskins Brown. I'm a marine biologist. Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Deanna Hoskins Brown. I'm a marine biologist by training. I ran for the Board of Education to make governance accessible to everyone, especially those who feel like decision makers are out of their reach or don't hear them. I've served for 12 and a half years. And what challenges me most as a board member is making the part-time job of a board member actually be a part-time job while you're being responsive to a full-time district of professionals who are relying on you to be responsive.
Wow. Very good.
My name is Connie Hall. I'm a retired teacher, assistant principal, and principal. I decided to run for the Board of Education because I saw, not only here in Georgia, but across the nation, a waning of respect for public education. And I thought it important for someone who had spent her life in education to make sure that people understand the crucial role public education plays in our country. I've served for 12 years, and the most challenging part, other than working with Mr. Cashmore day to day, the other most challenging, role is making sure that our families understand how important the education of their children are. I'm starting to worry that there's a waning of attitude towards the need for your public education.
Okay. Great. Good.
Thank you, Connie. My name is Sean Kachmar. People ask me, what do you do? And I tell them my primary job is to drive my kids around and pay for their stuff, which is true until recently. But my real vocation is I'm an attorney. I've been on the board for 13 years. I ran for the board, and it's interesting, Connie and I share a lot of the same core values. I really believe in public education as a foundation of our democracy. That sounds a little cheesy, but it's true.
No, it's not.
And then second, in the power of education to change individual lives. What challenges me the most, I think two things. One, I think I'm a little impatient, and the plodding, deliberative nature of a public bureaucracy frustrates me sometimes. And then second, apathy from within the system and within the community. No matter how hard our staff works sometimes the kids and families just aren't engaged. And sometimes the community that we're trying to serve isn't engaged either. So I think those two things frustrate me and challenge us at the same time.
Hi, my name's Roger Moss. I'm board chair. My vocation. I am a serial founder. I founded Spanish Children's Choir, helped found a charter school, and I'm also a performer. I'm a singer. Why did I run for school board president? I come from a family that values education above everything. and I reached that age where you start thinking about legacy. And I wanted part of my legacy to be that I helped this school system become the best. I've only been in office for a little over a year, so I'm brand new. Challenges. My biggest challenge is transferring from the private business sector to government. There are just different ways of doing things. And it can be very frustrating. And part of that is, Sean alluded to, as far as how long it takes to get things done. But the biggest, I think my biggest challenge personally is wanting the best and wanting all of the people in this town to want the best and to not settle for anything. So.
Good.
Thank you. My name is Paul Smith. I am a pastor here in the city of Savannah, Georgia. What led me to run for this position, my calling to serve led me to run for this position. My belief in education, the youth of our community, and the future of the city encouraged me to learn and to assist in policy making. I've been on the board 1 year, 4 months, and 24 days. But who's counting? But challenges will be, there's a plethora of challenges, but I believe that the main challenge that I struggle with is to find the middle ground for all people. Everyone looks at the picture and they see different things. They have different concerns from the same picture. But having to touch the needs of every community member from my district to District 1 and abroad, I think that's the greatest challenge.
David Bringman. My profession is professor at Georgia Southern, physical therapy. I was asked to run by the two sides of the fence that actually hated each other at the time. Quite interesting. I didn't tell them at the time that they were both asking me to run. I have been on the board now. This is year 5, 4 months. Is it 6? 4 months and 24 days? I don't know. And then challenges. Challenges on the big picture would, I agree with most everybody else's, but adding to that would be perception of public school in general, but then perception of public school in Chatham County. I'm a product. My mother and sister-in-law both taught in the district. My children attend the district. So just that we try to tell our story and people don't want to read it. And they want to say everything that isn't correct as the gospel. And then personally, because we've gotten to that personal challenge, you get elected and you know you're going to sit at board meetings and pass budgets and policy and things like that. But I never really knew that I would be getting the text message about the student that had something happen or the family that has this happen. And, you know, reading the email and making a face and my wife go, "What's up?" And I'm like, well, you know, I can't say, but something's happening. Like just that depth of, we think about the 35,000+ students as a whole, but then every so often it is that one single student story, both of success, but also of just life. And that really makes it difficult sometimes on the personal side.
My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a classically French trained chef that sells real estate now. I've been doing that for about 12 years. Why did I run for the Board of Education? When my predecessor said that she was not going to run, I had a child who at the time was about to go into pre-K, and I figured that instead of complaining about it from the outside, I can maybe do something from the inside. Been on the board about a month and a half shy of 8 years. Challenges, there was different challenges before the pandemic than there's different challenges after. Before the pandemic, kind of like Mr. Cashmore and Mr. Moss, my impatience of getting things done. Since the pandemic, the hyper politicization of everything that happens within education. On both sides of the aisle, it's basically, you basically hear from the extremes, which are in the minority. And when that happens, if you don't agree with them 100% of the time, you're wrong 100% of the time. And they do not understand, actually, most people do not understand what we are supposed to be doing. They think that we can put our fingers on every bitty little scale within education, when in fact, we're not allowed to by law. And they don't realize that. And people who attempt to run for the board in the past, they think that they can do things which they're not even allowed to by law.
Okay, I'm Tanya Howard Hall. My vocation, I'm a retired educator of 32 years. I say educator because I taught school from kindergarten through 8th grade pre-algebra, served as the district REP lead math teacher, served as the district parent liaison, served as the district Title I program manager. The reason why I ran for school board, I retired at a very young age. I was 54 years old. I had a lot of youth still left in me, and I want to make a difference in education, so I pursued running for school board to be able to view things differently from the other, rather sit on the other side of the table to learn more about the governance of being on the school board and in order to have an impact on education. This is year 6, and a challenge for me is the politics. Although this is a nonpartisan seat, it is not. It's very challenging with the politics and equity. With me, I was born in my district. Mother left the hospital, she came to Woodville. I was raised in my district, I went to school in my district, and I understand what it is to have, and I understand what it is to have not. I was a recipient of free lunch as a child, so I have a heart for people, a heart for the community, and at times I can be sensitive because I'm still stewing because David didn't let me ask a question earlier that I had during the meeting. It was 2 minutes left, and I had a very short question, but I'm just. But I enjoy what I do, and thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Okay, so.
That rattler coming out. I just got big.
So you see this picture, and sometimes school board members feel like this when they're getting ready to head to the school board meeting. You know, what we don't want to happen is we don't want you to feel like that. And more importantly, we definitely don't want the superintendent to feel like that, okay? We don't want to feel like the superintendent has to, oh man, I've got to get my armor on, we got a board meeting tonight. So we don't want that, okay? So here's something that's real interesting that you've already said that I thought was very telling. And here's the thing. I want to remind you, I want to take about 5 or 10 minutes to remind you why you're so important, all right? So let me ask you a question. And I know that it's different because normally I move around, we're being recorded. It's a little different, but I think you're used to having dialogue from where you're at and where I'm at. So that's good. I watched it. What level of government do Americans most trust? Local. There you go, local. All right, so let's look at it. Let's look at the data. So here's the bad thing. Fewer than 2 in 10 Americans trust the federal government. I got the source up there at the top if you need to see that. This is the lowest in 7 decades. 7 decades. About 2/3 say they have a favorable view of their local government, and about 54 have a favorable view of their state, and only 32 have a favorable view of the federal government, okay? It's not good, right? Listen to this now. Roughly 1 in 10 adults say they have a great deal of confidence in career government employees. But here's the problem. Dr. Watts, we're career government employees. We work for the government. And that's something when I became superintendent, as I might be meeting with a parent, and all of a sudden they said, well, you're part of the problem. I'm like, what problem's that? Well, you're part of this, whatever we perceive, you're part of this problem. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not part. I'm trying to help kids. But we gotta understand that people feel that way. Listen to this now. A majority of U.S. adults say that most of all candidates run to serve their own personal interests. Now, I don't think they're talking about board members, okay?
They are, is it?
But so see, it's coming. So see, you tell me. So see, this is really important. So here's the thing you need to ask yourself. You don't have to ask it out loud, but here's the thing I want you to ask yourself. You interact not only with each other, but you interact with other boards. Sometimes maybe at a training or GSBA or something. Do most board members seek office for the right reasons? That's just something to think. So what are two critical things board members must do? You got to acknowledge and understand there's a trust issue, and we're going to hit another slide on this in a little bit. Man, there's a trust issue going on. And you need to be a true public servant. I love that word servant, public servant who keeps students first. But here's the thing, guys, if local governments fail, will democracy fail? I'd argue it might fail. You are pivotal. So what you're doing is not only you're fighting for students, you're fighting for our nation. You're fighting for our purpose. So you got a really, really, really important job. So real quick, we'll hit some stuff like this. If you ever want to, I'm going to cite some things, but I'm citing now this Essential School Board book, Better Governance in the Age of Accountability, Nancy Washer. That's one book that I'm going to say. So here's the thing. She did a survey of board members, and here's what they said board members to be. What are characteristics of good board members, okay? I know you're not supposed to use that word good sometime. Your English teacher would get on to you in college about that, but we're going to use it for this, okay? First of all is, number one, you all know that. And it came out when you were talking. You need to be in it for students, not yourself or your agenda, okay? It's not an agenda. And I think what's happened is the distrust at the national level it's agenda driven. It's agenda driven, okay, often, okay? Belief that student achievement is possible for every student. There's not a student in your district, no matter the disability, no matter their background, no matter their education, there's not a student that we cannot help achieve. Not one student, okay? And here's this. You got to understand that the value of the school strengthens your entire community. I mean, the fate of society rests upon public ed. Man, your position is so important. You got to be able to analyze some data, board members say, and know what it can provide. You got to be able to look at some data and say, okay, here's what we see. Data's important, all right? You got to be a critical thinker. That's not critical of things. That's being able to take thoughts from different areas and combine those thoughts. You got to be able to say, okay, what is the school system trying to do? The one thing I love about board members is that often they understand education, but they can think sometimes not like an educator, if that makes sense, okay? Got to be a team player. You're a board of 9. Here's the thing that I find out really interesting. I do board trainings all over the state. But if you don't work well with others, you're not going to get anything done, okay? Because as an individual, you have no authority. You have no power. You only have a power as a group. So a board member has to be a great player, team player. And here's the thing. You got to be able to listen and find common ground. I would love to say how many, when your other board members were thinking, don't answer this, but how many of you really listened to what your other board members had to say today? Did you listen? To be that? Yes.
Can we advance our definition of the team? You mentioned us being a team of 9, but we used to use a term called Team 10.
Because she's on the governor.
That I'd like us to return to is the idea and the language and parlance of us perceiving us as a Team 10.
I love the Team 10 approach. I've heard it with other boards of 9, boards because you're right. She's an integral part of your team. We're going to go over that today, and thank you so much for that. And the part I really was referring to, though, is actually formal meetings. But I love that Team 10 approach. Thank you. That's a good thing to come back to. All right. So now, I got a question for you. Do parents and the community want local control in the education program that students receive in Savannah Chatham? Do they?
Sometimes, yes.
Some? Some of the time. If it fits their agenda. It fits their agenda. But at times, would you say they always want to be told what to do, or they want some input at times?
I think they always want local control, and if we're not doing what they want, then they want us to do what they want, and that's their definition of local control. I don't think local control for them is us. I think local control for them is when those seats are full, and if we're not doing what those seats say, then they want to change what local control is.
But then they run to the state to pass a statewide law to get what they want done. It's not happening locally.
Okay.
Then that's their local control.
Yeah. As board members, here's a question, do you believe in local control? And see, I do. See, here's something I think is real important. I don't think I don't think this district I came from needs to look exactly like the district where I'm at today. There's different. You have different needs. There needs to be an ability for communities to differentiate the needs of their students and have different programs, right? We don't need cookie cutters, correct? So here's the deal, all right? You are guardians of local control. You're the guardians of that. The most important group in America that protects local control is the Board of Education. That you're the most important. No one has a more important role in preserving local control in public education than BOE members. Now listen, look at that bullet there. Do you realize that there's elected officials at the state and federal level that want to take your authority? There's teacher unions across the nation that want to take that authority. There's for-profit educational groups. There's colleges and universities. Listen, one of these books, the introduction was written by somebody else, and they admitted that they weren't that crazy about boards of education. I thought it was kind of strange. But they want to tell you what to do. There's leaders of large business and industry who want to tell you what. There's researchers that want to tell you what to do. There's people that want to take the fundamental power from the local board of education, but you're the guardians of that thing. So it is so pivotal what you do. It is so important. And so listen, if you leave today just saying, you know, that bald-headed guy, I forgot what he said, but man, we're important. We're preserving our local control. Then we've had a good training. I really look at that last statement. I really believe that the welfare of our nation depends on public ed. Your role in preserving this sacred mission is essential. Okay, it's so essential. Now, what's happening now? I think I heard some of you say this, and I know we're going to take a break. There'll be a break sometime around 11:15, Mr. Chair. Whenever time you tell me to take a break, sir, whatever time
It sounds good.
you tell me, sir, and we'll take it. Yes, sir. So, let's be honest, public ed is becoming a battleground. Have you noticed that? And what's happening? People are taking issues that really don't have anything to do with that institution, and they're letting it be a battleground. So let's be honest. We had a major Ivy League university that canceled class yesterday for the rest of the time. Does that university really have any control in the issue that's being? They don't really have any control in that. So there's people that are trying to take issue. So here's the question I want to ask you. Is the battle best for students? When people have agendas or people have different priorities, I think one of you talked about groups on ends of the spectrum. Should that be involved in that? So, no, it's not. You know, I asked that question, if you have a health issue, have you ever had a health issue? And you're looking at doctors, you don't care about their political views. You don't care what they think on issues. You know what you care about? Are they good at what they do? Do they do it a lot? And are they a caring doctor? You don't care about that. You know, I'm gonna tell you, I grew up around 20 minutes from Sanford Stadium. Okay, I went to games starting in elementary school with my dad, and went through them even through college. Man, I had a great father. And so, but let me tell you something I learned at Sanford Stadium. There's people of all kind of different diversity, but when the mission was focused, I never saw arguments about issues or politics. Everybody was focused on what? that game and winning. And education is a much more sacred mission than a ball game. So we have to be focused. Here's the thing I'm going to ask you as a board member now, are you a good listener? That's something that comes up a lot. Are you a good listener? You know what a poor listener does? When somebody's speaking, you're thinking about what you're going to say. You're thinking about what you're going to say. I will tell you this, and Dr. Watts, I'm sure will tell you, as a person who's met with a ton of parents, if you just take a pen and pencil and you truly listen to somebody and you just ask questions about what they're talking about, at the end of their dialogue, 9 times out of 10, the temperature is here. They've been heard. Somebody's listened to them. Somebody's valued them. So what's your first priority in making decisions? It's got to be your kids. Here's something, we talk about this trust level, and I see this in your district. Transparency. You're transparent. You're even recording the training today. So, but listen, here's the thing I want to ask you. I call it the Maxwell test. The true test of a leader is when the leader leaves. The impact of true leadership will endure. So I've got a question for you. However long you plan on being on this board, will this board be better when you leave? Will this system be better when you leave? When you no longer decide to be a part of this board, when you no longer decide to be a part of this system, however long it be, will it be better? Yes.
I'm laughing because, are you asking, is it going to be better because we're gone?
No.
Because I think you're asking, is it better because we serve? Because there are a lot of places that are better when people leave.
Yeah, what I'm asking is really more specific than that. Will you put things in place? Will you put things in place that make it better? Not just your time on the board, but will there be things that say, hey, I helped get this. I helped get the Team 10 back. I helped do this. And look, so after you leave an organization, see, the test of a leader is not when the leader's there. The test of a leader is when the leader leaves. If the organization struggles after you left, then I would argue you didn't do what you needed to do. This test of an organization. Now, you can't hire a bad leader. Okay, so I'm not saying that. But in most cases, if things are put in place, or what I'm asking, I like our marine biologist to clarify me on this. It's important. Is yes, are you putting things in place that are going to make a difference? Great clarification. No, I'm not saying because you leave. That would be rude and offensive. And I try never to be rude and offensive. All right. So here's the question. Will the Board of Education, the Savannah-Chatham Public Ed School System, be stronger after your service on the board is complete? That's the question you want to ask yourself. All right? Now, let's look. Okay, I didn't get quite all this on here. That's, good consultants hard to find. But listen, here's the thing. Here's the thing I want to tell you. I called Dr. Russ Cook, head of the Carl Vinson Institute at the University of Georgia. I said, hey, Dr. Cook, glance at this. Okay, glance at this. Because he said, this is excellent. This is really good. Okay? This is what I love about your strategic plan. Is that your strategic map is that it's easy to see. And listen, I don't have to look at it. Students, right? Stakeholders, I got my eyes closed. Oh, I'm by the microphone. Students, stakeholders, employees, stewardship. The times I've looked, I've already got it kind of memorized a little bit. And you know what that's a sign of? That's a sign of a great plan. You have got a great plan, and Dr. Watts and her staff did a great job today in the budget thing, bringing you back to the plan, okay? You gotta have something that drives you. Let me tell you about education in the 90s. We had 1 billion plans. You had a SACS plan. You had a school improvement plan. There were so many plans, and there'd be these thick manuals, and everybody had ownership to the plan that they created. And I see some of you shaking your head. I'm telling you the truth. Then we got smart sometimes and said, wait a minute, we need one plan that permeates everything we do. And if we have to have other plans, this plan is going to drive those other plans. And that's so listen, this is great work. And I don't know who you need to thank, Dr. Watts or staff, I don't know who you need to do, and I'm not being paid to do this, but I'm just telling you, this is good. It's really good, okay? And here's the thing you got to know as board members, because listen, I've been looking at all your policies. This strategic plan is critical. I mean, it's part of, if you look at your code of ethics, which helps guide what you do, strategic planning is domain 2. It's critical of what you do, this plan. So you got a good plan, but you got to come back to this. Here's what I like about a strategic plan. I can't imagine working in a district this size. Can't imagine. I never worked at a district of this size. I can't imagine how somebody's always wanting to change your mission. Well, you need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do that. Well, see, here's the thing about having a strategic plan and a map and a guide. You have a course. You got to stick to the course. Now, at times, you might have to revise this or adjust it, but there's a process to do it. Stick. This is your course, okay? It's like a ship. You just barely get off course a little bit, and after you travel a little ways, you're in trouble. Well, this has got to drive it, okay? And then you got your specific plan, your performance objectives. You got broad areas that lead to performance objective success. How will the projects related to achieving strategies be executed? The steps needed to occur. So, man, this is really good. And then you have your guiding principles. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I know this could be possibly some type of revision going on. But here's your guiding principles. You got your vision and your mission. And I will tell you something really funny. Your vision was very similar to the vision of the district I was at. We were graduating. We wanted to graduate independent, productive citizens. That was a big thing for us. And the reason we had to graduate in ours is because where I live, kids just weren't graduating like they should. And so you're similar, just because it's similar to, I just think your mission, your vision's great. I love your guiding principles. But you need to, when you're making decisions, it doesn't need to be, you need to listen to your constituents, but you need to make sure as you're interacting with your constituents that they know that you have a mission, a vision, you have a strategic map, and you have guiding principles. And you need to let those things drive it. All right. Now, we talked about trust. There's a book. It's called The Trust Imperative by Andrew Doloff. That's a book I recommend. It's a pretty good book if you hadn't read it yet. And here's the thing we got to understand is we're talking about strategic issues. We got to remember that there's this trust issue. So look at this. Research from the Pew survey showed how the trust of government and government workers is on the decline. In 2024, Edelman reported that only 1 in 3 employees trust their employer. Yeah, it's not good. They also found that only 23% of Americans trust the leadership of the organization where they work. Now I know why those teacher forum meetings were so hard. They didn't trust me. They did not trust me. So here's some things he says in the trust imperative. He provides 5 ways for leadership to start school system to build trust. Look at that first step. The first step in gaining trust of others is to gain trust from others, to demonstrate trust in others. Accountability and empowerment must be balanced. Micromanagement breeds mistrust, prevents the individual from reaching his or her potential. So here, listen, I love the word accountability. I'm glad accountability is in there. But if you're going to hold somebody accountable, you got to empower them. If you don't empower them, how can you hold them accountable? You know, I used to work at the central office, because I was superintendent. And so a lot of times I'd have people at the central office that say, well, we need to tell the principals to do this, and we need to tell the principal to do that. We need to tell. I said, okay, but who's responsible for the results? If you tell them everything to do, now we got to have non-negotiables. But if every decision they make, we tell them what to do, then who's responsible? Well, they are. Are they? Are they responsible? Can you hold them responsible? So you got to think about that. You got to trust somebody, but you got to trust them. You got to have the ability to put some faith in them. Now they're accountable. They're got to be accountable. You got to hold them accountable, but you got to put some trust in them. So look at number 2. Live your mission. You got a great strategic plan. You got a great mission. So when making decisions, you focus on the mission in your plan, and you say, does the item in question further our mission? Will the guiding principle, which guiding principle does it support? And you got guiding principles. So you've got the things in place to do this. And I love 3, prioritize lasting change over immediate change. A lot of people, Mr. Board Chair, they're going to tug at you all the time and say, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do that. But those immediate little quick changes you make, most of the time, they're not going. I got my phone on vibrate, but somebody's calling me. I apologize. So they're not going to help. It's the systemic, prioritized decisions that that make true change, okay? True systemic change does not come from quick decisions, all right? And then here's the 4th thing. If we're going to want trust, we got to ensure student safety, and we got to lead a life of balance. And I like one of the board members, you said balance. You said that, and that was good. You have a career, you're on the board, you have a family, and people who lead need to have some balance in their lives, and that's including our superintendent. Got to have balance. They can't live and work here all the time, okay? All right.
Can I just say one thing real quick about number 3? Because
Yes.
there is a quote, and I need to find it because I never state it well, but that last part about the systemic change is not made from quick decisions, to a couple of my colleagues who want, who are, which I am right there with you sometimes about the speed of government. The intentionality and the speed of government being slow, the value in that, I think, is reflected in that statement. So as painful as it can be, there is some, I think, validity to being able to thoughtfully deliberate around those decisions.
Okay, good. I like it.
I got to respond to that. 100% agree. What frustrates me is once a decision's been made, it takes 3 years to implement.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another key word is trust. And as board members, we have to trust our superintendent. And a lot of times, as an educator, you may have doubt. And so that's always been a challenge for me, knowing what I know regarding education and having to trust the superintendent with decisions that he or she makes, that's key.
Very good. Yes, I'm sorry.
I'd want to also contribute to what my colleagues have said about systems. One of the challenges that I think we face as board members is that the duration of your tenure and the duration of the information that you need to understand the system may be really, really different. And so if your car was giving you a problem and you only looked at the symptoms for that particular day or week, and you didn't have all of the history of that car from your mechanic over the time that you've owned the car, you'd make a different decision on what you would do with that car on that day. And so I think that when we're looking at making lasting change, we have to look at the entire system as best we can, not just for the period that we have become part of the system or part of the Borg. We have to actually have looked at it in a much more holistic way.
That's very good. Very good. Very good. Okay, so you're going to see a lot. You're going to see me refer to this a lot. There's 5 habits of high-impact school boards. Edie, it's an excellent book. I'll tell you the interesting thing about research, articles, research on boards of education. There's just not a lot out there as much as you would think. As important as you are, you're neglected. So, okay, so look, Edie had 6 assumptions. So look at those 6 assumptions. Okay, and look, I got a question. When you read, you can read those. In my experience, I want you to think which assumption I've seen is the most underrated. I want you to try to guess out of those 6 assumptions. I see one that's really, it doesn't seem to be the belief of that assumption, that I guess one of the weaker assumptions of these 6, as far as in practicality.
Which one is most underrated?
Well, in other words, I see these are 6 assumptions that when you read Edie's book, he said, I want you to take these 6 assumptions and you think they're important. One of these assumptions I tend to see is not given the priority that it should be of the other 6. Does that make sense?
I'd say one.
Are you going gang signs?
Yeah.
Okay, so 6, believe it or not, what I've seen is most boards understand that. They understand they have to have relationships, and they do that. What was the other one? I heard the answer.
Number 1.
1? 3. I think it's on the decline, but it's 3. It is 3. Boards, listen, I serve on a board now, okay? I've served on boards. Like, I've served on the board like for 2 years. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I mean, it just was kind of hard to figure out. Boards, listen, you guys are very intelligent. I've been really impressed by you. But you still got, what did you say? What did you say? But you got to be developed. I don't care how talented you are. Now, you got to be developed. So here's the thing I think is interesting. We believe in continuous improvement, right? I'm sure that Dr. Watts preaches this constantly with her staff, constantly with her schools. We got to get better. Continuous improvement. But a lot of times, so if you ask the principal, hey, what are your goals for this year? If you ask the teacher, what are your goals? But if you go places and ask the board, well, what are your goals as being better board members? You get a blank look. So as the boards, you need to think about how can we get better at what we do? And you might do that. So now, listen, there's 3 questions. I love these 3 questions that Edie says. There's 3 critical questions a board member should be able to answer. And if you got a great plan, strategic plan, mission and vision, you're in good shape. It says, first of all, where is your district headed in the long run? In other words, what's your goals? Where do you want to go? Now, hopefully your strategic plan can answer that. Then here's the next question. What are we doing now and in the short term to get there? You know, a lot of times if you have a goal, it's incremental, correct? So here's the thing. You got a place where you want to go. What are you doing now to get there? Okay? And here's the third question. How's your district performing? Academically, financially, administratively, whatever you're looking at. And data should drive the last 2 questions. So if you're a board member and you say, hey, here's where we're trying to get to. Here's what we're doing now. And here's what some of our data, and here's what the data says. Tell you what, you're an impressive board member. 3 simple questions. But if you can answer those 3 simple questions, I think your constituents will be very impressed with you. Okay, so Edie has, and I'm keeping up with the time, 11:15, we're taking a break.
You're good.
And so Edie has 5 habits, okay, that he believes that when he was studying high-impact school boards, there's 5 habits that he believes that these boards would demonstrate, okay? The first thing is, what's the primary mission of a school board? The primary mission of a school board is to govern the school system at official meetings, okay? So I know you know this as a board member, but you have to constantly be reminded. The most important thing you do as a group is when you come together and you meet and you make decisions on, as the day, budget. You make decisions on policy. You make decisions on the recommendations on personnel from the superintendent. So when you're together, so the board, the only time you have official power is when the chair hits the gavel and calls that meeting to order. That's the only time you have official power. So here's the deal. As a board member, you can never allow non-governing actions to take your focus off the primary mission. It's not that you do other things, and you'll see that. But you got to remember being prepared, being knowledgeable, and being ready to go. I even heard one of the board members say, hey, guys, be sure you look at this stuff. Be sure you get your questions out here about the budget. You know, you got work to do, because the most important thing you do is going to happen in these meetings. You know, really, I call it the ring of power. The superintendent runs the day-to-day operations of the board, day-to-day operations of the school. But when that gavel clicks, she takes her ring off, and the board chair puts on a ring, and the rest of you put on a ring, and for the next board meeting, the major decisions that are happening in that district, you decide. So Edie says that you can't forget that. So I looked at some of your policies, and I mean, in your school board relations, it talks about how you'll stay to that, and you won't attempt to exercise individual authority over the organization outside your meetings. I looked at, you say in policy BBD, legislation of policy is the most important function. So let me tell you something about research. Research, I read a study about this. They looked at systems who have productive meetings. So what they did on research is they would take two school systems, very similar socioeconomically, very similar in demographics. One school system had dysfunctional meetings, board meetings, and the other school system had productive focus meetings. Guess which districts demonstrated over time to have the better student achievement? The ones with focused, functional meetings. Because you know why? If you're a leader, which system you want to work in? You want to work in a system that's got functional, focused meetings. Then if you get good leaders, who do teachers want to work for? They want to work in a system like that, plus they want good leaders. So see, you're the culture that you create from a board meeting might be a lot more important than you realize. Because when somebody's looking at your district, they might pull up a board meeting. Now, I'll be honest with you, I pulled up your board meetings. I've been kind of impressed. Okay, but here's the thing you need to remember. I didn't see all of them. But you need to think about that. Somebody's always watching you. That's one of the things you have to teach leaders in leadership. Somebody's always watching you. You know, sometimes it's not your words, it's your actions. Yes.
I just like to say it helps with board meetings when you have the subcommittee meetings. And that helps. That's really important. And that's how I learned a lot from attending those subcommittee board meetings, so that when you come to a board meeting, you have a good understanding of how to govern.
That's good. Very good. So here's the thing. You got to take an active role in your board development process. Look what Edie said right here. Edie says right here, he believes that boards can be underdeveloped and undermanaged as organizations. And say, look, sadly, board development has not been a high priority for many districts. So here's the interesting thing. Edie admits in his book that assumption 3 was a problem, that it was a problem. So look, 3 critical steps in superintendent board relations. You'll reach an agreement on key governing decisions on a regular basis. I look at some of your documents. You have a Savannah-Chatham County Public School System Superintendent and Staff Board Education Communication Protocols. This is excellent. I wish I'd have been smart enough to have something like this when I was superintendent. This is really good. Now, do you go by this? Okay, you know what Peter Drucker says? He says, culture eats what for breakfast? Strategies. Culture eats strategies for breakfast. What's that mean? You can have strategies in place, but what's your culture like? Is your culture, so you got some really good things. So you got to reach an agreement on how, so you got some stuff in there, and you also have a policy on board superintendent relations. You got to work out those steps. You know, here's the deal. You know, there's some things like the budget, you got a plan. I saw it. I love your plan. You know, we're going to meet here. We're going to do this. You got a plan. But then there's some things that, like, I came from North Georgia, right? We don't have hurricanes as much as we have snow. And so who makes those decisions on snow days? Well, now the government makes decisions. But used to in the old days, guess who made the decisions? Before Snowmageddon, we made those decisions. You know what we had to do in those mornings? We had to get up at 3:30 in the morning. And I would make the decision, hey, we had teams, and we'd go ride the roads. And then after that, we'd come back at 4:30, 4:45, 5 o'clock, and we'd make a decision about school that day. Well, the board, I said, hey, do y'all really want to be involved in that? No, we'll get your feedback. We'll let you handle that. Okay, we'll handle that. So sometimes they're like, now, the first group I called when I went to council school was I communicated with our board. In particular, I called the chair first. But simple things like that, you got to work out a policy. You got to work out some plans, okay? So you got to determine that nature of involvement. But remember, a strong governance team is going to have a look at that true mission and vision. You got that. This will provide the framework for it. The main driver should be your strategic plan. So now here's one thing I want to hit for a second. You got in your policy BBD. I looked at your policy. Here's something I see. I don't know if I do the most interaction with school boards in the state of Georgia, but I'm in the contest. Okay, I've interacted with already this calendar year about 12 boards. Okay, I do some searches I do trainings, and my day job I work with school boards and school systems. And here's something that I've seen sometime that you need to be aware of is how much time requirements do you put on your superintendent? I go some places where sometimes the board, half the superintendent's week is interacting with board members. So you got a CEO of an organization that's complex, that they're trying to run, but in some districts, I asked the superintendent, I say, how long? It's about half my time. Oh, that's not good. That is not good. So here's the thing I call boards. Think about that. Now listen, you've got to interact with the superintendent, Team 10. She's part of your team. But what you got to do is you got to think about, okay, if every person has the same time requirements that I have with the superintendent, would it be okay or would it be a problem? Because you don't want your CEO, listen, on boards, like if you're on a board you said the difference between public and private. Mm-hmm. If you're working out in the real world, those meetings happen, but man, they're efficient and they get to it and they get on about their business, right? Okay. Okay, so we got about 5 minutes.
No,
you want to stop now?
No, you can go on. Our lunch will not be here until 11:30, so keep going.
Okay. Yes.
Can we also talk about the premium of the superintendent's time because when you asked about how much of the superintendent's time was taken by the board, were they referring to the business week?
No, just in general. Just
in general, so
day-to-day operations of the school system. That's a great question. Yeah, we're not talking about, that's a great question. Like you're getting ready for the budget, well then you're going to have we're not talking about the day before the meeting. We're talking about just the day-to-day operations of the school system.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Like her work time, not can I just talk to you for a minute at 7 o'clock as you're driving to the office? Oh, can you return my call at, I'm thinking about the extra time that people say, for me as an educator, oh, can I see you just for a minute, right after class or right after a meeting? That just a minute for 30 people or 10 people means your day is much, much longer, not just the business day. I'm thinking about the people who want to just catch you. Oh, can I talk to you right after the committee meeting? It'll only take a second. I think that that's probably even more time than board members may realize if they're not in the business day itself.
Very good.
I'm thinking if we were to ask the board secretary how much of that schedule for the superintendent's day is caught up with formal meetings with board members, that we would see that so much of her time is taken up with board members, as opposed to, I was asking earlier, if we want these partnerships to help us build this little Acorn Academy across this county, shouldn't the superintendent have that time to get out there and work with those partners to bring them in, as opposed to sitting in her office and listening to board members? That's where I'm thinking that's going, that when you talk about board members taking up her time.
And so this is just a thing, this is just a trend I hear, but here's the thing you also got to remember, if you're pursuing something, if they meet Dr. Watts, they're going to be really impressed and they might be more interested. And so if she has the time to do that, then you might be more effective in that endeavor too. So yeah.
I would like a pie chart of the board members in your time.
But you don't want the superintendent to create that pie chart, right? Because that'll take time.
Yeah, I do, because I'll win.
Well, and then you need to, is it her request or is it the board member's request?
True.
Just being silly, guy.
I mean, but I think that, and I don't want people to say, oh, well, you know, Dion doesn't think that there ought to be conversations. I think that when you're asking for a moment of time outside the business day or a short turnaround, I think the question you ought to be asking yourself is, am I adding to efficiency or am I taking away? And if I'm giving her something that's going to make her job easier or make her job more efficient, or am I asking for something that's going to create more work and that's going to reduce efficiency?
You know, and I'll tell you the truth, I'm glad your board meeting's being taped because I'll probably use what you've been saying because those questions you need to ask. Really do.
I'll send you a bill.
Okay, send me a bill. I will.
This one's a citation. So
Citation, yeah. I'll give you.
No, already vested. I'll just take money out of, yeah.
That's really, what you said was really good. And that's really what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
So, you know, so when Dr. Watts started, and back when we all agreed on the communications plan, and one thing that Dr. Watts has tried to do is set up, you know, the small group meetings for those for that reason. So by having the small group meetings, you can get all of that information. A lot of times, you know, I hate meetings, by the way, just for the record. So I am a text and email person. And I don't know if we ever asked Dr. Watts what her preference was, but if she likes FaceTime. Yeah. So she likes FaceTime. But yeah, so I, you know, I think to cut back, you know, maybe more of text or email, or a lot of times what I will do, if we are going to have a meeting, I will save up like a lot of issues. So we're not gonna meet on every issue I have. You know, we may meet once a month and it's, here are my issues. So, but also getting back to that communications, and I did resend that out because part of that communications was not only with Dr. Watts, but was talked about how we communicate with staff and keeping Dr. Watts in the loop if we do communicate with staff. And letting staff know that we are going to, you know, I'll be passing this on to Dr. Watts. And that is just, you know, I think that is just a simple, it's courtesy, but it's also recognizing Dr. Watts as the CEO and us. We don't want staff to use us to undermine the superintendent. So.
I think we should remember that our communications practices, even as they're codified now, predate this administration. Because we got in trouble because board members were telling staff to do things.
Correct.
So that you're not that board member, but you know, our communications policy and practices came from a slap in the hand.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's
Better board meetings to watch.
yeah, those are the ones you need
Get
some
popcorn for this.
and watch. So yeah, we have learned, we've been reflective, we've grown, and we have, you know, passed those lessons on to our administration so that hopefully she will never have to deal with some of those issues because we have done number 3, developed as a board and figured out how to be.
You're right.
Yeah, but the communication with the CEO, all 3 of them have grown out of that, but have also grown from what do you want? At the beginning of each relationship, it's how do you want to communicate? What do you prefer? And that's kind of evolved over time. New superintendent, and I just know from the previous superintendent, new superintendent, there was a learning curve, relationship building curve, and then communication style changed as both relationships changed, and as there was growth in the district as well. So
Yes, sir.
I was going to actually, I know everybody's waiting on my response. I'm probably not a good example of this because I do not have a good work-life balance. I never have, so my normal is not to have that. And I know we are a collective board, but I want to be in a position where I can form individualized relationships with each of you. And this year, I'm a new superintendent. So I am learning each of your preferred methodology for, how you want to be communicated with. Some of it I pick up on naturally, like I can almost predict when I'm going to get a call from Mr. Smith. I can almost predict when I'm going to get a call from Mr. John. I can almost predict it now. So I don't know that I have a preference. I guess I am learning and adjusting accordingly. I do invite all of that information, though, because even though it may not be adding to my efficiency, it's a data collection process for me. When you call, you're giving me information that helps later in decision-making, telling me where your priorities are, and that helps me adjust my leadership accordingly. So I'm not complaining about communication and the individualized relationships I have with you all. They've been helpful this year.
One thing that I would like to add to it is that that our current superintendent, Dr. Watts, what she did that I thought was actually pretty ingenious is that she actually created a special email for us for concerns that we have from constituents. I think that takes a lot off of her plate as a whole. It makes it a lot more efficient, so that way it can be directed to staff almost immediately. Personally, Dr. Watts knows that if it's something that just a concern that doesn't need I don't need much follow-up on, I'll just send her a text. But if it is a concern, if I can't get on the phone, I'll just leave a message or a text and say, hey, when you have a moment, just if I could have give me a call. So I think that through learning what Dr. Watts' situations are and her learning what our situations are, she is able to become a chameleon with each one of us on how each one of us likes to communicate, which I appreciate.
And I did see when we'll talk about that, your constituent services, very good. So remember too, when I'm talking to you about this now, I'm telling you what I see as I travel. This is not I'll be quite honest with you, I don't have a lot of prior knowledge of Savannah Chatham. So remember, I'm always talking to you about my experience just across the state and just the state. Okay, so. Of course.
I'm just sitting here reflecting. I truly miss being on the executive board because you have opportunity to, provide feedback for the agenda, and you meet with the superintendent more. And since I'm no longer on that board with the new superintendent, I'm probably the one that you least hear from if you charted it, because I'm the type, I don't believe in, monopolizing a person's time. I take, time is very precious to me. And I know that Mr. Smith, as a pastor, he knows there's always that particular member. And as a parent, it's going to be that child. So I'm quite sure as a superintendent is that school board member. So I try to, you won't say it, but I know, I'm quite sure. So I just would love to maybe just have more
Touch points, you said that.
more touch points, because I'm not the one that's aggressive to just call you unless it's just something. If I call you, it's something. And my pastor, if I call her, she knows that it's something, because I really don't, I respect the time.
It's interesting to think about what we think as board members the role of the superintendent should be outside of our formal meetings. I, for one, like the idea of her being out there in the public, the eyes and ears for the whole board, and we being eyes and ears for you. But to me, that kind of dynamic out there, the public sees me, hears me. To me, that is so much of more value than, sitting in the office and listening to Connie, talk about what I want at my school. So I'm glad to know that you are studying and taking data on how we, our relationship with you.
Very good. So let's look at these 5 key areas in a board superintendent relations for productive meetings. First of all, and I think I see this, you got to have input. So you ever think, board members, you need to have input, you need to be able to know what's going on. Of course, I don't know exactly what, every school system has a little different, whether it's work sessions or whatever you do, that whatever means you have in place, you have a means for you can provide input. And sometimes it could just be the input like, I think there's a little bit of consternation with this one policy. Can we talk about this a little bit more? Communication. There must be communication. Make sure when we're talking about communication. So, and of course, I think one of you made the decision right before a board meeting. There could be a little bit more communication, but I will speak for most superintendents across the country. We want to hear that communication before the meeting. We want to know what's happening before. We want to know, have a chance to hear what you're thinking. We value your opinion, but we have to hear it before the meeting. So remember that dialogue is important. And of course, you have a protocol in place. And the continual improvement, remember, ask yourself, we want our schools to continually improve. We want everything to continue to improve. Are our board meeting, are the processes in place? Are we constantly improving? Are we getting better on how we do business? Are we collaborating? Are we working together? To collaborate, you have to do what? To go back to that word I talked about earlier. You have to listen. You're not a good listener, you're not a good collaborator. You can't be a good collaborator and not be able to listen. And you got to base decisions on data and information, not personalities, okay? And, the 5, I tell you, I hope Dr. Edie's not upset with me, but 5 I added is the no surprise promise. And you'd be surprised across this, most boards that are strong and develop this culture is Dr. Watts is not going to try to surprise you, but please don't try to surprise her, okay? Because it's not a surprise thing because you're Team 10, right? And I will tell you one thing, if we called a timeout and the coach is going to run a play, we all want to be on the same page. We communicate. You don't want surprises. Surprises aren't good for teams, especially if you're on the same team. And so you need to make sure that no surprise promise, that needs to be a part of your culture. So here's a question to warn the board members. You'll always have constituents who want you involved in the day-to-day operations of the school system. But I'll tell you what, some of you already hit on this, it'll take your enjoyment from the job. If you're always, they're trying to get you in that day-to-day operations, it's going to take enjoyment from the job. And remember, it's not your job. And here's the good news and bad news. The good news for you is that Dr. Watts, or the superintendent's going to run that day-to-day operations of the school. But here's the bad news for her. She also takes those arrows. When things are not going well, she's responsible. Now, here's the question I want to ask you. And I'll go ahead and answer the question in order to save time so we can have our break at 11:30, correct, Mr. Chair? Why do parents want you involved in day-to-day decisions? So let me tell you, my system wasn't as large. We were 5,000 and something students. One superintendent, 2 assistants. One of my assistants ended up being half-time. So as a superintendent, I did my own quality control. So once you went through the teachers and principals, then you dealt with me, okay? But here's the thing that I found out why parents didn't want to call me. They'd say, hey, yes, my son's name's John William Smith. In the high school, he's a freshman at the high school, and the high school's terrible, and he's never got in trouble before, and now he's been suspended for the 3rd time. I said, okay, all right, let me look him up. John William Smith? And I'd give the yeah. Well, he was suspended 8 times in middle school. Well, they kind of were picking on him. Well, you said you didn't have any input. I see we're here. Well, the high school requested to have a meeting with you, and you didn't come. Well, yeah, I had something going on. So a lot of times You know, so, no, that's happened.
Oh, I know it has. Sarcasm is my love language.
Yeah.
You're using a pseudonym right now.
Of course I'm using a pseudonym. John Smith, I mean, come on,
You got William in there. That-
yeah. So, but my point is this, do you see that? Do you see, so what they want to do is, they want to be able to tell you your story. Here's the thing, I know y'all don't know this, but sometimes the student does not tell their guardian or parent the whole truth. I know you don't know that. I know it never happens in Savannah Chatham, but sometimes they don't tell the parent. And I want you to know sometimes the parent believes the student. Now listen, sometimes the student is telling the truth.
Yes.
That's the scary thing.
Yes.
Like, oh my goodness, that happened. I can't believe it. So sometimes it does happen. But here's the thing about that is they're trying to bypass. And see, and here's the thing about our society. Once somebody says something about you, here's something that changed our society as we go to break, you're guilty to proven innocent. So once somebody says something about a teacher or about an administrator, you're guilty till you're proven innocent. It used to be the opposite. It's not. So remember in that chain of command, and we'll come back to it later on because Edie thinks it's important, and we'll take a break right now. But remember that chain of command is that you're wanting to be. Here's what I used to have to do. We went from, I'm old enough where we went from an elected superintendent to an appointed superintendent. When you had the elected superintendent, everybody felt like they could go straight to superintendent. Well, I voted for you. You got to listen to me. But when you went to the appointed, we tried to get that chain of command back better. So I always had the person that had to say, you hadn't met with the teacher principal, you got to go to the school. Sometimes they weren't real happy with me. So it can be done. I've been on that battlefront a long time in my life. You can listen to somebody, you can tell them you care about them, but you can ask them to follow that chain of command. Okay? So, Mr. Chair, it's up to you, sir. We'll take a break.
Yeah, so apparently the food is not here yet.
Oh, I keep. Do you want to still take a break, or do you want me to keep talking?
We're going to take let's take a 5. We'll come back.
Okay.
And let's see if we can get through.
I had waffles for breakfast, but I want some more waffles.
Okay. All right. Yes. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
What, Sean?
No, it doesn't go to their board because.
Oh, man, I didn't see the salt and vinegar.
Not just this kid, just about the practice.
Let's go, we're going.
Dave's had something going on.
I'm sorry.
Mics are cold. Mics are lukewarm.
Continue.
Okay, so we're going to look at now at habit 2, develop the capacity to govern. And as I told you, Edie, he just thinks that you got to have some norms to guide, to govern it, for governance, to have that team. You got to have some norms. You know, here's something I do see. I hear it when I talk to superintendents sometime. Do you have norms? I don't know if you do or not, but do you have norms for executive session? A few times you have to go to executive session. Do you have norms? I mean, you know, that's just a thing to think about. Because sometimes the reason I say that is because I do some superintendent searches, because the interviews are done in what? Executive session, right? And sometimes I see a board like, you need some norms. you need some things when you're in executive session. So remember that as a board member, you're always thinking, how can we be a better Team 10, and how can we continuously improve in our governance? Because remember, the individuals that make up the board will always be preeminent. And we don't want our culture to eat our strategies for breakfast, right? We don't want that to happen. So every board member's got to work as a team. And so look what Edie says at the first, that bullet there. He says he's found that board members are reluctant to invest in developing their own governing knowledge and skills once they've gone through the basic orientation. Now, I know that's not you guys, but I do see that a lot. I've been to that training. I kind of know what I need to know. Well, do you or do you not? Now, here's the thing you got to ask yourself. If I talk to board members across the state, interact with them, here's the one thing that a lot of them forget when they run for office. Who is responsible for monitoring the behavior and actions of fellow board members? You are. And see, a lot of board members don't realize that. It's not the superintendent's job. It's not even the constituent's job. It's each other. And if you're definitely, I mean, and I know you know this, but if you look at most every board has similar ones. If you look at your code of ethics, everyone has a conflict of interest page, and you have, I mean, it explicitly explains the process for your board. So here's the thing as board members, you're on a unique team. A lot of times when you're on a team, you have an outside authority, right? I mean, like you have somebody from outside that if you're like on a basketball team, your coach wants for you to exhibit leadership, but when they call a timeout, coach calls a play, everybody else is what? Kind of quiet. But being on a board, you are the authority for each other. And so remember, leadership, here's the thing about leadership, it can cost sometime. And you'll never know when you have to pay. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a superintendent who had an excellent board, a board known for being excellent, but it changed. Somebody got elected with an agenda, and the board was really struggling with how to deal with it. They hadn't had to deal with it before. And so you need to think about that, because sometimes that can be something that you have to look at. Now Edie says something really interesting. He said, problems occur when BOE members think they are more accountable to the segments of their community and their mission. Well, it's real interesting, because I looked on your code of ethics, and this is taken directly from your policy, and it says, render all decisions based on available facts and his or her independent judgment, and refuse to surrender his or her judgment to individuals or special interest groups. So that's actually in your policy. So what Edie says somehow became policy. I thought it was kind of interesting. Here's the thing. I was talking to a superintendent one time. I'm gonna tell you a story that's true. It was a smaller district, and you had a teacher in charge of taught in a very popular program within the high school. And there was a board member on staff and they were constantly communicating to the superintendent about their concerns about that staff person. And it was pretty continual. So lo and behold, some things transpired that happened, and they were going to ask that person, although they were tenured, they were going to ask them not to return. They had enough information to say, okay, all right, hey, yeah, this is not good. We're not going to offer you a contract. Do you want a hearing? No. But here's the thing that happened. This board member had given their vote to somebody else, and whatever that person said, they had to do. Well, the person they had given their vote to, guess what? They liked that teacher. So here comes that same board member, and when you're going into executive session, going over the issue, the board member did a 180-degree change. Why? Because they'd given their vote up. They'd given it to somebody else. Now, here's the thing.
Can we just clarify what you mean by giving a vote? You mean a proxy?
Well, they didn't. She didn't actually vote. So this board member had been on this side of the issue, and then when it came time to make the decision and be informed of that, they went to the opposite.
Oh, they flipped.
They flipped completely. Make sense?
Yeah.
So now, as a board member, if you were on this issue, on one side of the issue for 2 years, then in one night you flip, do you have the respect of the other board members?
You?
You're not going to have it. So see, here's the thing. So I've talked to superintendents. When a board member gives up their right, they give their vote to someone else, and then they finally talk to that person, they might flip. And I thank you for clarification. They flipped. And it's just, it's difficult. And as a superintendent, that's really hard, because they were listening to you, and all of a sudden you flip. So you got to have responsibility. You never can give your judgment to anybody else, and you have to be responsible for your decisions. Thanks for the clarification. So this is simple stuff, but ask yourself, teamwork guidelines, Team 10, I like that. Are you open? Are you honest in your communication? Do you respect and listen? I tell you what, respect is, I think one of you said this, I can't remember which one of you, respect's on the decline. Do you have no hidden agendas? And here's the thing, do you support the majority decision even when you disagree? Even if you were to vote against the motion, once that becomes policy, it's policy of everybody. And you have to support it. You have no choice. Whether it's 5-4 or 9-0, if that policy passes, it's the policy of this board, and you've got to adhere to it. And so there's a governing structure established by the board. And do you adhere by those? So here's the thing. I already heard this. I heard something about a retreat. Didn't I hear something about a retreat? Didn't I hear that? You had a retreat. I really think, here's one thing. Retreats were popular at one time, and then they were not popular, maybe because maybe transparent issues. But here's the thing. I do think it's important as a team that sometimes you have some interaction outside of meeting. Don't violate quorum, okay? Don't get in trouble. But it's good just to listen. Do you take the opportunity to share your heart, your hurts, and your victories with your teammates? Do you do that? Do you eat together when possible? Of course, the food's got to get here, but yeah.
Why did I run for school board?
That's funny. Very funny.
From Woodville Town.
Okay.
I think
Yes.
another word to include on teamwork guidelines is to inform each other. Just like we have the constituency group and the parents from all over the district, for some reason they tend to call me for certain things. I guess relating to education, maybe, I don't know why, but anytime I do receive any information, I don't just report it to that group. I copy that board member of that district on it so they can see what's going on within their district.
And all board members get it, right? And you try to say, and I'll tell you this, sometimes if you could, this is the one thing, that is great what you do, and then try to, whenever you can, is when you get issues and they're starting to surface, try to make sure you communicate with everybody, all 9, all 10.
Also, one thing is that I fit into this box a lot because a lot of times I'll be the one dissenting vote.
Mm-hmm.
But even in that instance, I'm still going to support what the decision is.
Good for you.
Just because I don't necessarily agree with it doesn't mean I'm not going to support it.
Good.
Because at the end of the day, we are one team.
Yes, sir.
and we have to respect that. I respect the decision of that. The other thing is that when it commit to open and honest communication, that's not just between board members, but it's also with the superintendent.
It's very much so.
One thing that, and it goes back to the other slide about, no surprises at the board meetings. That's one thing that Dr. Watts has been very good, at least with a lot of things, because we had rezoning and a lot of the schools were affected in my area. And, she knew where I was probably going to stand before she even told me because of conversations.
Like it.
However, what she was able to do is kind of go back to the drawing board, find a compromise that it didn't make everybody happy, but it was a compromise. It was a give, and nobody had to give up any of the principles, which I really appreciated.
And that's another thing I would like to have. I would like to show what you just said to board members. Hey, might not, but I'm gonna support it. That's where we should be. All right. All right. So let's play an active role in leading innovation and change. Today, there's probably more change going on in our culture and society probably than ever. When you say that, I mean, it's just, we're changing. So being on a board can be a little intimidating right now. So there's a lot of controversial issues out there. There's a lot of change, but here's the thing I want to tell you. There's never a need for better leadership at the board than now. This is the need is critical, okay? So listen, board and change. So here's the deal. Board members are uniquely qualified to play a critical role because they will see the system differently. And I know a couple of the board members, you're retired educators, but don't you see the system a little differently now being a board member? See, you see it a little different. And see, that really helps Dr. Watts because see, all her staff see it as an educator, but there's something about being on a board. You see, not that you still use all your extensive experience, but there's things you see a little differently, and that is so important. Yes, I want to hear this.
Because as a teacher on the other side, you understood the how, but being on the other side of the table, now you can see the why.
There you go.
Why it's done like that.
Yeah.
It's not just stuck on how it's done, but why it's done. So
Very
that's
good,
helped me out
very
a lot.
And I will tell you this, that is so instrumental when you're communicating, that an attentive board member that is looking to see things out in the community helps the superintendent so much, if you can just communicate those to her. So here's the good thing about change. It gives you an opportunity to make a real difference. I had to be a part of a system where we made a lot of changes, but a lot of good things happened. That's a great feeling. Man, it's a great feeling. And remember this, the real changes in policy and finance, who's the only group that can make those changes? It's you. You're the only ones. So any lasting policy, any lasting change, anything in the budget that's funded, it's got to come from you. So all that authority comes from you. So it can be a little intimidating too. But remember, despite the stress and strain, it can be really exhilarating too when you make changes that help kids. So you can be champions for change. So remember that. Look at that. Strategic plan must drive this change. But that's always your directions, always your compass. So here's a question I want to ask you. What are some ways to address change collectively and cohesively with the superintendent's strategic plan? What are some ways to address it? I'm not looking. Yes.
I think one way is to have informal conversations so that we're seeing change more in real time. So when the board gets together to talk about the action that change may require, people aren't caught off guard. Like, wait a minute, there's change. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I didn't know this was happening, because each of us is experiencing and seeing change in a heterogeneous community. And I kind of sit very solidly in certain parts of my community in terms of where I spend time and the institutions I visit. And so there may be changes happening in places I don't have no clue, but someone else has been seeing it for several months. So by having informal conversations, ones that are not like action driven, but like we used to talk, what was that? What was that thing that we did before the meeting, Sean? Board, whatever, board man, not board matters.
Oh, where every board member.
Peer-to-peer.
Yeah, peer-to-peer. Thank you, Michael. So we used to have a peer-to-peer before the board meeting where you could just kind of check in and say, hey, this is what's going on, if anybody would like to know. And it allowed us to know things that we might otherwise not know. But I'd also be happy for happy hours, walks in the park, some sort of informal gatherings that are not text messages, just because I just don't respond to a lot of text messages. And, but, some other way to communicate collegially, know what's going on, so that when we get around the horseshoe, we're aware.
That's really good. Yes.
I like the idea of always trying to find out what's going on in the rest of the nation and bringing that as a way for change, because so often either we will feel, oh boy, this is just happening here in Savannah, and then we find out, no, this is a national trend. Everyone needs bus drivers. It's not just Chatham
Yeah,
County,
exactly
okay?
right.
So those kinds of things can help, and it also always helps me to see the differences between Georgia and other places in the nation that may be more or less progressive in terms of bringing change.
Very good.
I was just going to say, I think any process can work if the collective group using it agree to the guardrails and stick to them. Peer-to-peer was useful, but it also sometimes severely violated the no surprises rule. And then whatever the issue was, I want pizza on Thursday instead of Tuesday at this school, became the issue du jour because all of that was being videoed. And there was a scramble by the superintendent and 4 senior staff to fix that problem right now because it was out in the public.
Yeah.
And for some of us, there was a collective understanding of, I'm not using this as a platform or a gotcha, but some people did, and that was part of the concern. So
Very, very good.
there have to be rules about how we're going to use whatever process and a collective agreement to follow them.
And you're so smart because there's always, people always want to divert from the mission of what that was. And you're right. Anybody else? That's really good stuff. Anybody else? And I think to really add the point that was made, when you have an innovation, most of the time an innovation is a response to something that's a challenge in your district. So the challenge, you got to communicate about your challenges, right? And so that communication is so important. And here's the deal, guys. Here's something you got to do. Sometimes people say, I feel, I perceive, I sense, but it needs to be seen in data. Data, they need to support it. I love qualitative research, but you need some quantitative things that support that, okay? So always remember that.
And then, uniquely qualified as I sit here, I look across at Denise, I think of urban planner. Look at Dr. Hoskins Brown, college professor. Look at Ms. Hall, retired principal. Go down the route, attorney.
What is Sean?
And then in the middle, we have a maestro. He's a musician. And then you come on down, you got Reverend, you got a pastor. You come on around, you have Mr. Bremer, who is a college professor. And then you have a former chef and a realtor. And it's just awesome that we have all of these different unique abilities
It
and
really
we see
is.
things differently. And it just, a lot of people think in the public that you have to be an educator to serve on the board. I've had people to tell me that I say, no, you can be a truck driver
Right.
and be on the board.
That's right.
So it's just good to have that unique qualifications for each and every one of us, and we learn from each other. It's just, even when Dr. Hoskins Brown said peer-to-peer, I saw the look on Mr. Cashmore's face. I said, "Oh, he's going to say something."
I think we both agree there were pros and cons.
That's very good. All right, so, all right, all of a sudden, I'm not wanting this change. I want to shift Where's my arrows? Am I still connected? Heard?
Yes.
All right, did I hit something? Use my clicker.
Yeah, oops.
There we go. See, look at that. All right, thank you. Okay, so here's the thing. You are Team 10, but here's the things I want to hit on. Remember now, Edie is reporting this, and I'm just telling you things I see, okay? But you got to pay close attention to the board and superintendent partnership. You are a team. You are a governance team. But here's the thing in life, guys. You can never take a relationship for granted. That's the relationship with each other. Yes, sir.
Our lunch is here.
Oh, man.
He stopped him mid
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
And
Relationship with food supersedes.
yes.
You want to eat while we're talking?
And I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on the next couple, so let's,
Are we having a working lunch? Are we
yes, we
We are
can. We
bringing
can.
our lunch?
We can.
back in here?
But yeah, but he doesn't get to eat.
That's all right. I don't need, I'm fine. I'm hired help. I don't need to eat. I'm good.
Yeah, you hired help.
I'm fine, really. I'll be okay.
Are we going?
No, I don't want to eat on camera.
Can we pause the camera, Todd? Can we pause the camera for lunch, Todd? Oh, no, we can't if we're talking.
I mean, we can put a slide up that says we're in recess.
Okay.
And but still continue?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that discussion. If you want to take a full break for 15 minutes and eat, you can. We can pause the slide. If you want to come back here working and continue, we'll keep rolling.
Okay.
To your purview.
All right. All right. We'll take 15.
15, yes, take 15. Yes, sir.
They were saying, can we put a
If you didn't cut your butt.
All right, sir, you can get it rolling again.
Okay, and we're on.
All right, so we took off, we started back on the importance of the board superintendent relationship. And so we know that where we closed was that everybody, anytime you're in a relationship, you got to work. It's work. It's whether it's your parent, spouse, coworker, whatever, you have to work at it. And you got to work to keep the partnership healthy because stressful times are coming. And, you know, and so honesty is critical. It's already been hit. You got to be honest. You got to be forthright. But here's the question I've asked you. I look at, have you ever talked to the superintendent when he or she was fired with no concerns or issues having been mentioned? As a matter of fact, I talked to the superintendent one time. He had moved to the district, just got the valuation. Valuation was excellent. 2 months, waiting on the new contract. 2 months later, the majority of the hands went up. Was not offered a contract. Guys, nobody should be treated that way. People shouldn't be treated that way. Now, I was also talked to boards when the superintendent was having some concerns. The superintendent didn't voice those concerns. And next thing you know, the superintendent took a job somewhere else. That shouldn't happen either. So neither one's right. So remember, but here's the one thing I see sometime across the state. Sometimes I see where the board members have different expectations for the superintendent than they have for fellow board members. And you can't have that. You remember Team 10. So you got to have the same expectations for all team members. You know, set some targets. And remember, I love that local control, but you see places where the superintendent and board get on different places, then that local control can be questioned. And we don't ever want where people feel more committed to the needs of a particular group than they do to the governance of the school system. Yes?
If someone complains, well, you're just a cookie cutter board. Whatever the superintendent wants, you just, stamp it. They don't understand the machinations and negotiations that have gone on before that unanimous, because it does look wonderful to me when anytime we have a 9-0.
Oh, right, of course.
So how do you educate? That's the thing that's missing to me.
That's a great question. I think you go back to all the steps that happened before that vote took place. Committees, sessions, listening sessions, whatever the issue are, most of the times when you're making a decision, the public is, and I want to use this word properly, ignorant. They don't know of all the work that you've done. And so what you've got to do is you've got to educate them on all the work that's been done. And sometimes it could be in defense of Team 10, Dr. Watts. You've had to do a policy that the state's passed a law and you don't have a choice in. So sometimes it's just, sometimes there might not have been work. You have no choice. There's a law passed. Yes.
I'm glad you all are talking about this in this way, because it creates an opportunity to say that on personnel decisions, the public is never going to have all the information. And so we just have to accept being misunderstood, because they can't know all the information. It's not for public consumption. And I think that's, although folks have in the past come to our public comment and wanted to talk about personnel matters, it's not just that we don't do it because we're protecting a particular individual. It's because we are protecting all individuals' rights not to have their personnel matters discussed in public.
Exactly. Yes.
And another thing is that a lot of people don't realize that the superintendent, she will touch us or talk to us at least 3 times before we vote on it. And they don't, like what Ms. Hall was saying, they don't see what the work that's being done behind, in between the meetings, in between committee meetings, the conversations that are had between the superintendent and board members and other board members. And so they don't see that work. They just see 9 hands go up or 8 hands go up or whatever, when it's kind of those kinds of votes. They don't see all the work that has been done by staff and the conversations and the gives and the takes and the pulls and the pushes that have done to get us to that point.
Excellent point. Very, very good. Yes.
But I will say that I have had people comment to me that our board seems to work well together. So I think the public sees that, and I think, maybe not everyone, but I do think that there's a significant portion of the community that understands that in order for us to work well together and to be able to make decisions collaboratively, I mean, you have to put in the work. And, you know, in the past, we've had some other elected groups that have not been as cordial towards one another as I think we all tend to be. And that's one of the things I speak with pride about with about my colleagues is we don't necessarily always agree, but you know, I feel that, you know, as a board member, very fortunate to be able to have a conversation with anyone around this horseshoe. And I think that we do a pretty good job of trying to, and I think the public sees it as well. So.
That's good. You know, the exact example of polarization is D.C., if we're honest. And what do the citizens think of D.C.? They're the least respected out of the governing entity. So we don't, you know, so we don't want to be that. We don't want to be that. So here's the thing I do see, and this is just what I see across the state as I interact with boards and superintendents, is a lot of boards do not properly use a superintendent evaluation for growth and improvement. You know, nobody. Would you want your spouse, child, loved one to work for a silent boss that does this? Nobody wants that. You want feedback, but I will tell you, a lot of places that's what they get. They do evaluation once a year. They don't do it twice a year. They don't follow up. They don't communicate, and it's thumbs down and thumbs up. And nobody wants to be treated that way. Nobody should be treated that way. And so. So remember, communicate from your heart, communicate, keep that plan in your mind, and cultivate that relationship. Okay, so next one is this is the important thing is you got to reach out externally and internally. You know, you got to reach out to constituents in your community. You do have to form relationships. You got to share your circle of input with others. And as people interact with you, just be sure they don't change. They can't change that board's authority, responsibility, and accountability for decisions. You know, a lot of times I see where the board's getting ready to hire a superintendent, which I think you did a very good job in your hire. But a lot of times people want to take that authority from the board, like, well, no, it's the board's job. You elected them. You got to trust them. But you got to play it. Look at that number 2. You got to play a visible role in a positive internal climate. We're going to talk about, you'll see in a second, I'm going to show you some slides we'll get to, and you're going to see where climate's so important. And here's a question I want to ask you. Have you ever talked to a teacher or administrator after a parent bypassed them, the building principal, central office staff, and superintendent? Have you ever talked to one that comes straight to you? Have you ever talked to that teacher? Have you ever talked to that principal?
They ended why?
You know, so here's the thing, guys. It's very humiliating for a dedicated staff person, for somebody to comment to a board member about an incident, and sometimes that their rendition or view of what happened was not quite accurate, to be honest with you. But so here's the thing. Ask yourself this question: can you listen but still direct the parent and community person back to the appropriate person in the district? I know y'all have the communication profile, and you get your weekly communication, you have your constituent services. But a lot of times, you just got to encourage that parent. Say, listen, have you met with a teacher? Have you met with the assistant principal? Have you had a chance just to have a discussion? I've heard parents that they were saying, guaranteeing me an incident happened, and it was on video. They just had to go down and watch it. They just had to see it. And so it's real important that if we want our culture to be the proper way. And so here's the thing. Here's a question you got to ask yourself. Are disgruntled personnel and disgruntled parents and guardians handled in the same manner? That's different. Remember now, personnel, if there's a hearing of termination, who decides that? The board. So remember, you're going to be the judge for a personnel issue. You don't need to get too involved. You don't really need to get involved at all in that early steps. You need to let the day-to-day operations go to the superintendent and staff. Because eventually, now what that person needs to understand is, eventually, if it gets to there, you're determined. You got the ultimate say, not the superintendent. But here's the thing that's, I think, interesting sometimes. You know, I was in administration for 25 years, and I always thought something was interesting. I always worked to get teachers. I wanted teachers to feel respected and loved, and I wanted them to always. We try to follow a chain of command, but a lot of times a teacher would do what? When it comes to something they were upset about, guess what they'd want to do? They want to violate the chain of command and go straight to that. I'm like, wait a minute now. You know, if you're truly passionate about something, you should follow it. You should follow it.
So, before we go any further, so and again, following that chain of command and following how personnel decisions are made, those personnel hearings are usually held after the event.
Correct.
After that decision has been made.
Correct.
What we don't want is the personnel coming to board members
That's exactly right.
and interfering with the original decision.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
I've had the experience, especially at one of my schools, I'll get an email and the teacher, the principal, and myself are on the same email. So it's almost like, you know, the parent is feeling I'm starting there and going. So, of course, in that case, I send it on to Dr. Watts or just stay out of it until.
That's okay.
But
And that's not
they've
unusual.
gotten very clever about how to.
Yeah.
My experience when people are trying to jump the system or bait the system and put everybody in the same email is that the behavior that makes me feel most comfortable is to be an educator in that process about what the policy should be. Like people will call and say, well, I talked to the teacher and they didn't do this or the principal didn't respond in this way. I'll say, okay, well, the policy is this. So what you should have experienced is this. And at some point, often, somebody has done something different in the policy. So I typically will say, at this point, this should have been your experience. At this point, this should have been your experience. If what you are telling me is true, I'm not going to say, ooh, that sounds bad. Let me help you. No, if what you are saying is true, then probably the right person to talk to in this chain is this person. And if it doesn't have, if you don't see responsiveness there, then go, to the next person. Because, sometimes more than just the parent is acting emotionally in a scenario, and someone may not have followed the policy, but they can be given an opportunity to follow the policy. You can say, go back and ask for this, see if if you get that. So I think we become educators when those come in, not adjudicators, because we're going to be adjudicators later. Whether it's an extreme bit of behavior on the part of the child, or whether it's an extreme bit of behavior that is a personnel action.
Outstanding what you said. And I love, you hear what she said? So see, Dr. Watts does handle the day-to-day operations, but your policies dictate those day-to-day operations. So if you go back to those policies, then that's grade A. Perfect. Matter of fact, that's one thing I was going to say that I don't need to say now, later on. Your policies will dictate that day-to-day. So three mistakes. Don't ever, this is what I see across the state, and Edie would see this too, but don't take your community for granted, but you communicate well. Here's one thing that happens, working to get public input from after the problem surfaces. And I understand sometimes problems are going to surface and you're going to have to get input after the problem. But what you want to do is when you can, you want to try to be as proactive as you can. You want to be as proactive as you can and get that input. And remember that day-to-day operations do not take part in that critical task. That day-to-day operation is the job of the superintendent. You're part of the team. Okay, so look, here's what we've noticed. Public has suffered from a dramatic loss. Public schools have suffered from a dramatic loss of legitimacy and authority over the past 40 years. Your schools are kind of under assault, if you want to be honest. People are distrustful, and support from stakeholders must be earned. Board member superintendents are often under continual fire. Here's the thing I want you got to educate your staff on. 50 years ago, the teacher and the school, they were saw in a positive manner, and a lot of times the teacher was right. Now we flip, and most of the time parents see the teacher as what? Wrong. And so that's just part of that, you know, we got to acknowledge it's like that way, and we just got to work to get that respect. Here's back to Welsher's book. She said she thought there was four, after her doing her study, she thought there was 4 sacred duties of a school board. And she said the first one is establish and promote the ownership of the district's vision and mission. Isn't that what y'all did today? Let that mission drive you. Next thing is focus on results and monitor progress. Don't you do that in the strategic plan? And I love this, create conditions for student achievement. That's good. And the last thing, here's a sacred thing that the board needs to do. Ensure the community of commitment, respect, and trust. Man, well, if you put out those 3 things, if people think you're committed, you're trustworthy, and you're respectful, you're in good shape. Now, here's the thing I would say, here's one thing I would tell a board member. If I have a code of ethics, one thing I'd add is periodically I'm going to view that. Because if somebody's looking to have issues, they're going to see if you're doing what you're supposed to do. But here's the thing I'd ask you, because a lot of you have been 14, 15 years. What is another sacred duty of a school board member? What would you tell board members across the state? What's another sacred duty of a school board member? Yeah, other than something we mentioned here.
Stewardship.
Oh, I love that word. I love that word, a part of your plan, too. It's a word that I thought a lot of people didn't use now, and I don't know whose idea was it, but you get 5 stars from me for that. I love that word, stewardship. You're entrusted with resources. I can't stand when somebody's flippant with the resources that the government has entrusted them to be responsible for. I love stewardship. I love this in your strategic plan. Okay, so let's follow up. We're gonna be pretty quick. We're gonna hit a couple things, and then don't worry about this PowerPoint's long, but we're not gonna belabor on some things. Here's the thing I want you to understand. Out of all the things you control, the quality of the teacher is that most important thing to the day-to-day achievement of that kid. Y'all agree? You agree? When that kid gets that, now, some people say that's the most important. I would argue in research, you better be careful about saying that's the most important thing, period. It's the most important thing that you control. So I went on Google, and I said, if a young teacher was Googling what school to select or what system to work in, and look what they said to look for. Be surrounded by coworkers who know what they're doing and who are providing a top-notch education to their students. It says look for a supportive, collaborative work environment. So here's a question I'm going to ask you. How do prospective teachers learn about the culture of a school or school system? Who are they going to talk to?
Their peers.
Their what?
Their peers.
That's right. They're going to talk to their peers. The biggest recruiter in your system will be teachers who are positive, and the biggest negative thing in your are teachers who are negative. So yeah, you need recruiting, you need partnerships, you need higher ed. But guys, we want a place where they need advancement, compensation, but teachers need to feel respected and supported. And I tell you what, I'm going to tell you something as a former leader, though. It's a difficult thing. I never forget it. We had a high school where I was at, and we went to a 7-period modified schedule. We thought it was best for our kids. Not advocating for that schedule, we just thought it was best for our kids. And we gave all our core teachers 2 planning periods a day, 2 50-minute planning periods a day. We gave them a lot of voice in hiring. We were a charter system. But you know what I did one day? We went from signing in to doing it by computer, and boy, it was a major morale. It just caused a lot of morale issues. So what I learned is it can be something simple, but they didn't feel like that was professional for some reason. I think because you could write in your time, and then we were trying to upgrade for efficiency, right? But but you gotta communicate. Do teachers have a way that you can get the pulse sometime and just see what's happening? It's following your chain of command. Because let me tell you something. What teachers say about Savannah Chatham schools is gold in hiring staff. It's gold. So a system's got to develop a positive culture to retain people. But remember, morale is a fickle animal. All right, let's look. Let's look at this next slide. How has accountability for student achievement changed the position of the principal? I was a principal in the pretty early 90s. How do you think it changed to now being a principal now?
Much more difficult.
What now?
Much more difficult.
Much more. Why? It is much more difficult. It's a lot. I totally agree. Why? Target moves. Good.
To me, the school is more responsible for the totality of the child's life than it used to be.
So now the school is, there's all these variables that impact the student. And man, we got, not only are we supposed to, we all believe in equality, and we better believe in equity, but we can't guarantee outcomes. But sometimes they want us to, right? So being a principal is rough. And so we already established this, what's the most important, that teacher quality? But here's the thing, look at that third bullet, guys. Principals got to have some autonomy in hiring with certain parameters. Can principals be held accountable if they don't have a strong voice in selecting their staff? There's some places where, in some smaller areas, and I see some of y'all, that they want to tell the principal who to hire. Well, the principal's not responsible for who they're hiring. They're not responsible for the quality of teachers. Can you hold them accountable? I'd argue no. So you have to have some parameters. So with autonomy comes accountability. That's the secret sauce. Expectations grow with autonomy. Now, there's got to be non-negotiables. There's got to be procedures and standards, and there's got to be your human resource department has to have a process for making hiring. But Mac McCann is my dad. This is what my dad told me one time. He said, "Son, I'm going to tell you, did I ever tell you my parent philosophy?" And I said, "No, sir, you didn't." He said, "Well, that's my philosophy. If you were in trouble, I wanted to be the last person that you'd want to know about it. But if you were being treated improperly and you needed help, I wanted to be the first person that you would call." And I said, I told my dad, "You were successful."
Can we answer number 2, though? You went over that, but that's important to me. I don't know that we all would agree on that. What is the most important variable in student achievement?
Okay, well, Ken, so what I would say is that we are in our control, that are in our control. I'm not saying, so elaborate on that. I really want to hear what you say on that.
Well, because I think it's parental attitude.
Well, okay, see, okay.
I don't think it's.
Listen, I totally agree, but the one thing I want is that it's the things that the school system can control. Correct. And I think that's the thing that people, this is where they misquote that research. They say, oh, the teacher's the most important thing out of the things that the school system controls. But if we have issues, right, I totally agree. As a matter of fact, I would tell you research, and I spent a little time doing research. My research totally supports what you're saying. The school cannot outweigh everything. The teacher cannot weigh out everything else that the child's dealing with. You're 100% right. But the principal cannot control those. They can help maybe influence those parental issues, and you want to help that, but they can definitely control the quality of that teacher. I think that's well said, and I totally agree. So that's why the chain of command is so important. Hey, listen, there has to be accountability. I would, it's okay to say, hey, there's just some people that were from here, they were talented, but there's got to be an intensive interview process, and that superintendent establishes, but superintendent she can't do all those interviews, especially a district this size. You got to empower people. And you ask yourself, if you were, as we're getting ready to close, and we won't have really time to hit it, but if you were a principal, what would you want from a board nowadays? What would you expect from your school board? What? Listen, have a way to listen, let me do my job. And hold me accountable.
Bring the resources.
Yeah, resource, there you go. Make sure you give them resources. Very well.
Yeah, give resources, just maybe
I agree. So listen, here's some slides. We're not going to go over these today, but I thought you'd find them interesting. Here's just some things taken from the teacher burnout that the DOE recently did. You went over this at a board meeting, but it's just some very interesting comments to look back out at, how teachers' assessment's an issue. And then it talks about how preserving and protecting their time. Talks about pressure and the unrealistic expectations. I think we had a board member just say, hey, sometimes we put a little too much on the teacher. Teacher voice and professional growth. And then mental health and wellness. You know, it's funny. You know, is mental health an issue for students? It is. But you know what we're finding out? Mental health is also an issue for staff. Absolutely. It's an issue for staff. Here's the thing I want to tell you. There's this, I tried to do a seesaw. Can you tell us a seesaw? Yeah. All right. Yeah, good. So here, you got to remember school is, here's what happens. Sometimes as we try to intervene and help kids, sometimes we can go too far in the direction. We got to keep it balanced. I'll give you an example. This has happened across the state. I see it everywhere. When COVID hit, we had, you know, people were dying. So we couldn't go to school. And so we had to be able to deliver that instruction, to deliver that content to kids, right? So when kids came back to school, what happens? Those things are still in place. And now what happened with attendance across the nation? What's the problem with attendance? It's terrible. So can you teach a first grade kid to read if they don't come to class? The computer's not going to do it. Can you teach calculus or algebra to a high school student? They're not, if they're just trying to do something off. So you see, you constantly got to balance that. We want to be caring to students, but we want a safe and academic focus too. And anytime we let that seesaw get out of shape, we want it always even. We want to be love kids, support kids, but we need them in school. We need them. So it's difficult. I don't have an easy answer to that. But I will tell you, I've seen districts had sincere motives in trying to help kids, but sometimes their motives hurt kids. And I've seen sometimes schools get a little too strict and a little too non-student centered, and it hurt kids. It's a balance. It's a balance. It's not an easy balance. I have no magic words or no magic advice for that. So, okay, I'm going to do, before we do the evaluation, I'm going to do one thing I want to show you, and I'm going to show you something I do. All right, there we go. And I think y'all asked, somebody might even ask this slideshow from the beginning. Here we go. All right, look. Here's in my day job, I do finance for school system and bonds, but here's the one thing I just want to show you. Look at where I'll go. Those are the districts that work with my firm, okay? So I'm a lot of places, right? A lot of places. But here's the thing I want to tell you. I've learned about the power of boards. Let me tell you what I've learned as a former superintendent. I've been in sessions and boards were getting ready to do a project, and we talked about inflation. We said, look, inflation's here. It's going to be, inflation since April 20 has went up 30% on projects. Look at your declining purchase power. But then I've seen boards, you know what I've seen them do? Nothing. They didn't do anything. And I realized how, in my day job, it's taught me how important boards are. I knew you're important. And I saw other systems that said, hey, we got to get out in front of this. We got to focus on our resources. We got to be good stewards. And it really has amazed me. I've seen boards who turn down millions from the state on a project because they don't really want to listen to the options. And I've just realized how important you guys are. That shows you some rates. And so here's the thing that's interesting is the economy is not as bad as people think it is. And here's the thing that's real interesting. You know what a lot of boards did? They said, we don't want to do anything. Construction is kind of crazy. Let's not do anything. Well, now it's 30% higher. And so what I learned is when I sit in all these board meetings I sit in, I'm like, you guys, you got important decisions to make. You got decisions that could save people millions and millions in dollars and resources. And you can be a good steward. You got an important job. You see the market's been a little crazy. And that's all I wanted to show. And I just wanted to show you real quick. And you can look at that later. I know it's fast, but I'm not trying to do a plug for anything. But the thing I've learned is you got an important job. And listen, there's trends and issues, and you can't go to sleep on it. You can't go to sleep at a presentation. You gotta be awake for all of them. You gotta be on your P's and Q's. So you got an evaluation to do. Do you have that evaluation in front of you? Yes. All right, you do that evaluation, be honest. I'll send it all back to, Dr. Laracy. It's been an honor to be here. I appreciate what you do for kids. I wish you the best. And go make a difference for them every day, okay?
Thank you very much.
I know. When's it? Let's do another one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Collecting, Roger? You going to Johnson?